Picture this. You wake on the 8th of February, 1587, in your chambers at Fotheringhay Castle. And for a moment, just one precious moment, you forget where you are. The winter light filtering through the barred windows could be from any royal residence. Then reality crashes down like a wave of ice water. The familiar weight of chains around your ankles reminds you that you haven't been free to walk without permission in 19 years. Your fingers automatically reach for the rosary beads hidden beneath your pillow, worn smooth by decades of desperate prayers whispered in a dozen different cells. The stone walls of this place hold winter like a tomb. Even with the fire burning low in the grate, your breath mists in the air when you speak your morning prayers. Your ladies in waiting, the few loyal souls who chose exile over comfort, sleep on straw pallets around your bed. They've aged alongside you in captivity, their faces marked by the same lines of worry and resignation that you see in your own reflection. 19 years. You count them like beads on your rosary. 19 years since you fled Scotland seeking sanctuary from your cousin Elizabeth, believing that royal blood would protect royal blood. How naive that seems now. How foolishly you trusted in the bonds of kinship when politics had already severed every tie that might have saved you. You remember the day you crossed the border into England, soaked from rain and desperate after your defeat at Langside. You actually believed Elizabeth would help you reclaim your throne. Instead, she made you her permanent guest, too dangerous to release, too valuable to kill, until now. The door to your chamber opens without ceremony. No longer do servants knock or wait for permission to enter. Thomas Andrews, the castle's steward, steps inside with that peculiar mixture of deference and pity that has become so familiar. Behind him stands a man you don't recognize, tall, grave-faced, wearing the colors of royal authority. "Your Majesty," Andrews begins, then stops. The words seem to lodge in his throat like stones. You rise slowly from your bed, every joint protesting after years of damp castles and meager fires. At 44, you feel ancient. Though you know Elizabeth, 5 years your senior, still dances at court while you waste away in exile. Your auburn hair, once your greatest vanity, has thinned and grayed. You hide it now beneath caps and veils, another small vanity surrendered to time and sorrow. The stranger steps forward and bows, not the deep bow due to a reigning queen, but the careful courtesy shown to a condemned prisoner who once wore a crown. "Your Majesty, I am the Sheriff of Northamptonshire," he says. His voice carries the weight of unwelcome news. "I bring word from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth." Your heart hammers against your ribs, but your hands remain steady. You've been expecting this moment since the Babington plot collapsed in ruins around you 6 months ago. Since they dragged you through that mockery of a trial, where English judges condemned a Scottish queen for crimes against a crown you never acknowledged. "The warrant has arrived," the sheriff says simply. 4 words. 4 simple words that carry the weight of your entire life's reckoning. Your ladies in waiting stir on their pallets, sensing the change in the room's atmosphere. Jane Kennedy, your most faithful companion, sits up and crosses herself. She's been with you since you were both young women, full of dreams and ambition. Now, she'll watch you die. "When?" you ask. Your voice sounds remarkably calm, even to your own ears. "Tomorrow morning, at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow." After 19 years of waiting, dying comes with less notice than a change of laundry. You almost want to laugh at the absurdity of it. All those years of negotiations, letters, plots, and counterplots, and in the end, death arrives with bureaucratic efficiency. The sheriff continues, his voice professional and distant. "You may have your servants present. Father Melville will be permitted to attend you, as will your ladies. The execution will be conducted in the Great Hall, before witnesses of suitable standing." Suitable standing. How careful they are with their language, these English officials. They won't say, "before a bloodthirsty crowd," though that's exactly what they mean. They've made your death into entertainment. a spectacle to demonstrate the price of defying English authority. "I thank you for the courtesy," you say, "because courtesy costs nothing, and dignity is all you have left." The sheriff nods and withdraws, leaving you alone with Andrews and your awakening ladies. Outside your window, you can hear the sounds of construction beginning in the courtyard below. Hammers striking wood, voices calling instructions. They are building the scaffold that will end your life. And the sound echoes through the castle, like a heartbeat, counting down your final hours. Your ladies begin to weep soft, helpless sounds that cut through you worse than any blade could. You move to comfort them, these women who have sacrificed everything to share your exile. They deserve better than to watch their mistress die like a criminal. "Hush now," you whisper, gathering them close. "We have known this day would come. We must meet it with grace." But even as you speak the words, a chill runs through you that has nothing to do with the February cold. Something in the sheriff's manner, some careful distance in his courtesy, suggests that tomorrow will hold horrors beyond a simple beheading. The English have had 19 years to plan your death. They will not waste the opportunity to make it memorable. That night, as your ladies pack your few belongings and Father Melville hears your final confession, you lie awake, listening to the construction sounds below. Each hammer blow drives home the reality. Tomorrow, you will die. But how you die, that remains a mystery, wrapped in official politeness and bureaucratic euphemism. The sound of wood being shaped into your final stage fills the darkness, and you find yourself wondering if Elizabeth herself chose the manner of your death, or if she simply signed the warrant and left the details to men who understand the theater of public execution. Either way, tomorrow will reveal the true cost of 19 years spent as England's most dangerous prisoner. You dress for death the way you once dressed for coronations, choosing each garment with deliberate care. The red velvet petticoat spreads across your bed like spilled wine, the color of martyrdom, the color of the blood that will soon stain whatever scaffold awaits you below. Your ladies move around you with practiced efficiency, their tears dried now that there's work to be done. Jane Kennedy fastens the sleeves of your black satin bodice, while Elizabeth Curl arranges your auburn wig to hide the gray hair that prison has given you. In the small mirror they hold up, you see not the young queen who once charmed the French court, but a woman hardened by betrayal and loss into something more dangerous than royalty, a symbol. The morning light streaming through your chamber windows carries sounds from the great hall below. Voices, footsteps, the scrape of furniture being moved. They're preparing your final stage, and the knowledge sits in your stomach like cold lead. Father Melville kneels beside your bed, offering the comfort of last rites. His hands shake as he anoints your forehead with holy oil, not from fear, but from rage barely contained. This good man has ministered to you through 19 years of captivity, and now he must watch the English murder you for your faith. They cannot touch your soul, he whispers in Latin, the forbidden language of your forbidden church. Remember that, your majesty. They can destroy the flesh, but your soul belongs to God alone. You nod, but your mind wanders to more earthly concerns. Your son James, now King of Scotland, has written exactly one letter protesting your sentence, a perfunctory diplomatic gesture that fooled no one. The boy you sacrificed your throne to protect has decided that his English inheritance matters more than his mother's life. A commotion in the courtyard draws you to the window. Hundreds of people are streaming into Fotheringay's grounds, merchants, farmers, minor nobles, anyone who could beg, borrow, or buy their way into witnessing history. They've come to see the only anointed queen ever executed in England die for her bloodline and her faith. Your hands don't shake as you watch them gather. They should, perhaps, but they don't. You've had 19 years to prepare for this moment. 19 years to imagine every possible ending to your story. Death holds no surprises, only the mystery of its manner. A knock at your door interrupts your thoughts. The sheriff enters, flanked by guards whose faces show a mixture of duty and discomfort. Behind them trails a small man in black robes, the Dean of Peterborough, clutching a Protestant prayer book like a shield. "Your Majesty," the sheriff says, "it is time." You turn from the window and survey your small group of companions, Jane and Elizabeth, who chose exile over comfort, Father Melville, who risked everything to provide you spiritual comfort, even your little terrier, Gedden, who somehow senses the gravity of the moment and presses close against your skirts. Then let us not keep them waiting, you say. The walk to the Great Hall feels both eternal and impossibly brief. Your legs, weakened by years of limited exercise, carry you down corridors you've paced as a prisoner, but never seen as a condemned woman. Guards line your path, their faces carefully neutral, but you catch glimpses of something else in their eyes: uncertainty, perhaps even regret. The Great Hall has been transformed into an amphitheater of death. A scaffold draped in black cloth rises 2 feet above the floor, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses packed shoulder to shoulder. The air thrums with barely contained excitement, the peculiar energy that always surrounds public executions. These people have come to see justice done, but what they're really here for is spectacle. You enter with your head high, leaning on the sheriff's arm not from fear, but from the simple reality of your weakened body. Your ladies follow, their faces streaked with fresh tears, but your own eyes remain dry. Let them see a queen die like a queen. The crowd murmurs as you appear, some from respect, some from curiosity, some from the simple human thrill of being present when history unfolds. You recognize several faces from your trial: earls who condemned you, judges who pronounced your guilt, officials who carried out Elizabeth's will with meticulous bureaucratic precision. The Dean of Peterborough steps forward, prayer book in hand, ready to offer you Protestant comfort for a Catholic soul. His face shows genuine compassion, but also the confidence of a man certain that he serves the true faith. "Your Majesty," he begins, "I have been sent to—" "Mr. Dean," you interrupt, your voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "I am settled in the ancient Catholic religion, and mine to spend my blood in defense of it." A murmur runs through the crowd, part shock, part admiration for your defiance. Even here, even now, you refuse to bend. The dean's face flushes, but he steps back with what dignity he can muster. Your servants help you remove your outer garments, revealing the red petticoat and bodice beneath. The symbolism is not lost on the crowd. You will die in the color of martyrdom, dressed like the Catholic saint you believe yourself to be. Several witnesses cross themselves, whether from respect or superstition you cannot tell. The executioner waits beside the scaffold, a large man whose face is hidden behind a traditional black mask. Something about his posture troubles you, a hesitation, a stiffness that speaks of inexperience or nerves. Professional executioners move with calm efficiency, but this man fidgets with his axe like a carpenter uncertain of his tools. As the black blindfold is tied around your eyes, cutting off your last glimpse of the world, you whisper the prayer that has sustained you through 19 years of captivity. "Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The scaffold feels solid beneath your knees as you position yourself at the block. The wood is rough against your cheek, smelling of fresh sawdust scattered to catch your life. Around you, 300 people hold their breath, waiting for the swift stroke that will end your story. But as you hear the executioner raise his axe, as you feel the displacement of air that signals its descent, something cold settles in your stomach. This man's breathing is too rapid, his movements too uncertain. The English have had months to plan this execution, but in their arrogance, they may have chosen spectacle over competence. The axe begins its fall, and you realize with crystal clarity that your death may not be the dignified martyrdom you've prepared for, but something far more horrible. The first axe blow strikes the back of your head with a sound like splitting timber, and the world explodes into white-hot agony that tears through your skull like lightning. But consciousness doesn't fade. Instead, it sharpens with terrible clarity as you realize the executioner has missed your neck entirely. Pain beyond description floods your senses, but through it all, your mind remains cruelly aware. The rough wood of the block presses against your cheek, now slick with blood that pools beneath your face. The sawdust they scattered to catch your life turns dark and wet, absorbing the crimson evidence of the executioner's incompetence. Around you, the great hall erupts in gasps and horrified murmurs. Someone cries out a woman's voice, sharp with shock. Through the roaring in your ears, you hear the executioner's panicked breathing, the shuffle of his feet as he repositions himself for another attempt. This is not the swift, merciful death you prepared for. This is butchery. Your lips move in silent prayer, muscle memory taking over when conscious thought becomes impossible. The Latin words your mother taught you, the prayers Father Melville whispered during your darkest nights in captivity, they flow from you now like water from a broken vessel. Ave Maria, gratia plena. The familiar rhythm provides an anchor in the storm of agony. The second blow lands at the base of your skull, and pain explodes through every nerve in your body. Your vision fractures into spinning fragments of light and darkness, but still, impossibly, horribly, you remain conscious. The executioner's blade bites deep into bone and sinew, but your neck refuses to sever cleanly. Blood flows freely now, soaking through the blindfold and pooling on the scaffold. The metallic smell fills your nostrils, mixing with the sawdust and the sweat of 300 witnesses who came expecting a dignified execution and instead witness a nightmare of incompetence and suffering. Through the haze of pain, you hear Father Melville's voice rising above the crowd's horrified murmurs. He's reciting the prayers for the dying in Latin, his words carrying clearly through the great hall, despite the chaos. In paradisum deducante angeli. May the angels lead you into paradise. But paradise feels impossibly distant when your body clings so stubbornly to life. The crowd has gone from excited anticipation to horrified silence. You can feel their collective shock like a physical presence in the room. They came to see justice done, to witness the orderly dispatch of a traitor. Instead, they're watching a woman being hacked to death, like an animal by an executioner who clearly lacks the skill for his grisly profession. Jane Kennedy's sobs reach you even through the roaring in your ears. Your faithful lady-in-waiting, who has attended you through 19 years of captivity, now watches helplessly as your death becomes a spectacle of botched brutality. You want to comfort her, to tell her that your suffering has meaning, but your voice is lost in the crimson tide flowing from your wounds. The executioner raises his axe for the third time. His breathing is ragged now, whether from exertion or panic, you cannot tell. The weight of 300 stairs bears down on him as he realizes that his failure is being witnessed by earls and commoners alike. This execution was meant to demonstrate English power and precision. Instead, it showcases incompetence on the grandest possible stage. The third blow finally finds its mark, though even then the separation is not clean. You feel the axe bite through the remaining sinew and bone, completing what should have been accomplished with the first stroke. Your head rolls free at last, but the nightmare of your death is far from over. The executioner reaches down to lift your severed head by the hair, the traditional finale to any beheading, the moment when he displays the traitor's face to the crowd and declares justice done. It's a ritual as old as public execution itself, the final humiliation of the condemned. Instead, his hand closes on empty air. Your auburn wig, the carefully arranged hairpiece that preserved the illusion of royal beauty, comes away in his grasp like autumn leaves in a storm. Your actual head, revealed now in all its mortal reality, hits the scaffold with a dull thud that echoes through the stunned silence of the great hall. For a moment that feels like eternity, 300 witnesses stare in perfect, horrified silence at what lies before them. Your real hair, gray thin, cropped short like an old woman's frames, a face marked by suffering and time. This is not the dignified death mask of a martyred queen, but the pitiful reality of a middle-aged woman destroyed by politics and circumstance. Then chaos erupts. Women scream, men shout in shock, and someone in the crowd vomits audibly. The executioner stares at the wig in his hand like a man caught in a nightmare, while your head lies exposed on the bloodied planks, not the noble martyr of Catholic propaganda, but a human being reduced to meat and bone by the machinery of state justice. The sheriff steps forward, his face pale as parchment, trying to restore some semblance of order to the proceedings. But order is impossible now. The careful choreography of your execution has collapsed into grotesque farce, and every witness will carry this image with them for the rest of their lives. Dr. Fletcher, summoned from London to confirm your death, approaches the scaffold with obvious reluctance. The royal physician has attended many deathbeds, but nothing has prepared him for this scene of botched brutality. He kneels beside your severed head with trembling hands, duty compelling him forward even as his stomach rebels against what he must examine. What he sees there will haunt his dreams for years to come, not the peaceful repose of death, but something that challenges everything he understands about the boundary between life and the grave. Your eyes flutter open and closed, as if you're trying to focus on something beyond the veil of mortality. Your lips continue to move in what appears to be silent prayer, the muscle memory of faith persisting even after decapitation. 15 minutes. For 15 impossible minutes after your head leaves your body, witnesses swear they see signs of lingering consciousness. The physician's training tells him this is merely the nervous system's final spasms, but the sight before him suggests something more disturbing, that the human spirit can persist even when the body's integrity is destroyed. The crowd presses forward despite the officials' attempts to maintain order, morbid fascination overcoming their initial horror. They've witnessed something unprecedented, something that will be discussed in taverns and drawing rooms across England for generations to come. Your botched execution has become a story that will outlive everyone present in this hall. But perhaps the most heartbreaking detail emerges when your servants are finally permitted to approach the scaffold. From beneath your bloodied skirts, a small form appears, your beloved terrier, Geddon, who somehow remained hidden throughout the entire execution. The little dog emerges whimpering and covered in your blood, confusion and loyalty warring in his simple animal mind. He lies down between your head and body, a living bridge across the chasm of death, and will not be moved despite the officials' attempts to clear the scaffold. Even this small creature understands something profound about loyalty and loss that the 300 human witnesses struggle to comprehend. In those terrible quarter hours after your beheading, as your lips continue their silent prayers and your eyes flutter between this world and the next, the great hall becomes a theater of the impossible. Dr. Fletcher kneels beside your severed head with instruments that shake in his hands, trying to understand what he's witnessing with his own eyes. The royal physician has attended the deathbeds of princes and paupers, but nothing in his training prepared him for this moment. Your pupils dilate and contract as if responding to light. Your mouth moves in what appears to be coherent speech, though no sound emerges from the severed throat. Most disturbing of all, your eyes seem to track movement, following the physician's face as he leans closer to examine you. "Merciful God," Fletcher whispers, crossing himself despite his Protestant faith. He's a man of science, trained in the universities of Cambridge and Padua, but science offers no explanation for what he observes. The human head, separated from its body, should lose consciousness within moments, as blood pressure drops and the brain starves of oxygen. Yet you appear aware, present, somehow still fighting to complete whatever final prayers sustain your spirit. The crowd's initial screams have given way to an unnatural hush, broken only by muffled sobs and the shuffle of feet as witnesses strain to see. Those in the front rows press backward, while those behind push forward, creating a human tide of morbid fascination and horror. The sheriff barks orders for order, but his voice cracks with the strain of managing something far beyond his experience. Among the witnesses, Reactions split along lines that reveal the deep fractures in English society. The Protestant nobles murmur about divine judgment and the wages of treason, but their voices lack conviction. Even they recognize that what they're witnessing transcends simple justice. The few Catholics present, carefully watched throughout the proceedings, see confirmation of their faith in your continued prayers. To them, you've become a living saint, sustained by divine grace even in death. Father Melville stands at the edge of the scaffold, tears streaming down his weathered face as he continues the prayers for the dying. His Latin phrases rise and fall in rhythm with your moving lips, as if you're participating in your own final rites. The Protestant officials make no move to silence him. Even they seem to understand that this moment belongs to forces larger than their earthly authority. Your servants cluster together like sheep before wolves, overwhelmed by the horror of what they've witnessed. Jane Kennedy clutches Elizabeth Curl's hand so tightly that both women's knuckles show white through their skin. They've served you through imprisonment and humiliation, but nothing prepared them for this prolonged agony of watching you die by inches. The executioner, his name is Robert Bull, though history will barely remember him, except as the butcher who botched a queen's beheading, stands frozen beside the scaffold like a man trapped in a nightmare. The wig still dangles from his hand, a pathetic reminder of his failure. Sweat pours down his face despite the February cold, and his breathing comes in short, panicked gasps. This was supposed to be the crowning achievement of his career. Executioners who dispatch royalty earn places in history, their names whispered with a mixture of fear and respect. Instead, Bull has become a cautionary tale about incompetence in the face of ultimate responsibility. The axe that should have delivered swift justice has become an instrument of prolonged torture. Word of your botched execution spreads through Fotheringhay Castle with the speed of wildfire. Servants who weren't permitted in the Great Hall cluster outside the doors, trading whispered accounts of what transpired within. The details grow more horrific with each telling: the moving lips, the wandering eyes, the faithful dog who won't leave your side. In the castle's kitchen, where your meals were prepared for 19 years, the cook who fed you crosses herself and whispers prayers in Gaelic. She remembers you as a gracious lady who always thanked the servants, who spoke kindly to those beneath your station. The woman being mutilated on the scaffold bears little resemblance to the dignity she witnessed in your daily routines. The stable master, who cared for the horses that carried you from prison to prison, stands in the courtyard listening to the sounds from within. He's a simple man who understands animals better than politics, but even he recognizes that what's happening in that hall violates something fundamental about mercy and human dignity. Meanwhile, in London, Queen Elizabeth sits in her private chambers at Greenwich Palace, unaware that the warrant she signed with such reluctance has become a nightmare of incompetence and brutality. She spent days agonizing over your death sentence, claiming she never intended it to be carried out, that she hoped for last-minute intervention or reprieve. When word reaches her of what actually transpired at Fotheringhay, she will rage against her advisors and claim innocence, but the blood will stain her hands nonetheless. Back in the Great Hall, Dr. Fletcher makes careful notes in a leather journal, documenting what may be the most extraordinary medical observation of his career. His physician's training wars with his human revulsion as he records the duration of apparent consciousness, the movement of facial muscles, the continued dilation of pupils. These notes will survive in royal archives for centuries, providing grisly evidence of what happens when political necessity meets medical reality. Your little terrier, Gedden, has become the focus of superstitious attention among the witnesses. The dog's refusal to leave your side, his positioning between head and body, strikes many as supernatural intervention. Dogs, according to medieval belief, can see spirits invisible to human eyes. His behavior suggests that something more than mere flesh and bone lies scattered on that bloodied scaffold. The officials exchange nervous glances, unsure how to proceed. Protocol demands that your remains be removed, the scaffold dismantled, the hall restored to its normal function. But protocol never anticipated an execution that stretched beyond death itself. How do you clean up a martyrdom in progress? How do you restore order when the very foundations of certainty have cracked? Thomas Andrews, the castle steward who delivered your death warrant just 24 hours ago, watches from the gallery with tears streaming down his face. He's overseen executions before pirates, thieves, murderers, who met their ends with varying degrees of courage or cowardice. But he's never witnessed anything like this prolonged agony, this stubborn refusal of life to yield to death's authority. As the 15th minute passes since your beheading, your lips finally still. The fluttering of your eyelids ceases. Doctor. Fletcher leans close one final time, checking for any signs of the consciousness that seem to persist beyond all medical understanding. He finds none. Death has finally claimed you completely, but not before demonstrating that the boundary between life and the grave is far more complex than anyone imagined. The silence that follows is different from the shocked hush that greeted your botched beheading. This is the silence of a crowd that has witnessed something beyond their comprehension, something that will haunt their dreams and challenge their understanding of mortality itself. They came to see a queen die. Instead, they've seen something that resembles a miracle, terrible, beautiful, and utterly inexplicable. The sheriff finally finds his voice, calling for the scaffold to be cleared and the witnesses to disperse. But the damage is done. 300 people will carry the story of your death across England and beyond, and with each telling, the details will grow more extraordinary. The woman who wouldn't die easily, the queen, whose faith sustained her even beyond death, the execution that became a resurrection, if only for 15 impossible minutes. Your servants are finally permitted to approach your remains. They gather the scattered pieces of your mortality with trembling hands, wrapping your head in a clean linen cloth, covering your body with a cloak that bears the arms of Scotland. Even in death, they serve you with the devotion that marked their years of shared exile. But as they prepare to carry you away, each knows that what they witnessed transcends service and loyalty. They've seen the human spirit refuse surrender even when the body's defenses crumble. They've watched faith sustain consciousness beyond the moment when consciousness should cease. Whatever your faults in life, whatever political necessities led to this scaffold, your death has transformed you into something larger than the sum of your earthly failures and successes. The blood-soaked sawdust will be swept away, the scaffold dismantled, the great hall scrubbed clean of evidence. But the stain on history remains permanent, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful victories come through defeat, that dignity can be maintained even when everything else is stripped away, and that the human spirit can triumph even in the moment of the body's destruction. Your body lies in Peterborough Cathedral for 25 years, but death brings you no peace, no silence, no rest from the storms of politics that consumed your life. Even in your marble tomb, you remain a pawn in games played by kings who use your memory like a weapon against their enemies. The cathedral's ancient stones absorb the whispered prayers of pilgrims who come seeking the blessing of a martyred queen. They arrive in secret, these Catholics who risk imprisonment to kneel beside your grave. Their rosary beads click softly in the darkness as they pray for your intercession, believing that your horrible death has transformed you into something more than mortal, a saint whose suffering purchased divine favor. But it's the living, not the dead, who shape your legacy in ways you never could have imagined. Elizabeth, the cousin who signed your death warrant, spends her remaining years haunted by what she set in motion at Fotheringhay. Court observers note how she flinches when ministers mention executions, how she refuses to sign death warrants without days of agonized deliberation. The woman who once dispatched enemies with calculated precision now hesitates before each exercise of ultimate power. Your son, James, the boy who abandoned you to English justice, discovers the political value of your martyrdom when Elizabeth dies childless in 1603. As he rides south from Edinburgh to claim the English throne, he carries with him the memory of the mother he sacrificed and the story of her gruesome death. The Catholic powers of Europe, who might have opposed a Scottish Protestant's claim to England, remember instead the son of Mary Stuart, the queen who died for her faith. In his first act as King of England, James orders your remains moved from Peterborough's modest cathedral to Westminster Abbey, the same church where English monarchs are crowned and buried. The son who did nothing to save your life claims you in death, using your martyrdom to legitimize his rule over the England that killed you. The irony would be bitter if you could taste it. The exhumation reveals the physical reality of what politics had obscured. Your body, preserved by the cold Peterborough stone, shows the brutal evidence of that February morning's botchery. The multiple axe wounds, the severed vertebrae, the damaged skull, all provide silent testimony to the executioner's incompetence. The physicians who examine your remains whisper among themselves about the suffering you endured, the prolonged agony that your moving lips had proclaimed to 300 witnesses. James spares no expense on your new tomb in Westminster Abbey. White marble carved by the finest craftsmen, gilded inscriptions proclaiming your royal lineage, a crown carved above your effigy, every detail designed to present you as the noble queen, rather than the convicted traitor. But the most telling detail is the tomb's location, placed directly across from Elizabeth's final resting place. In death, the cousins who could never coexist in life share the same sacred space, their enmity transformed into eternal proximity. The executioner himself becomes a cautionary tale whispered in taverns across England. Robert Bull, the man whose incompetence turned your execution into a nightmare, finds that his botched work follows him like a curse. No magistrate will hire him for future executions. His reputation spreads through the network of professional headsmen, marking him as unreliable, dangerous to the very notion of swift justice that executions are meant to represent. Bull takes to drink, haunted by the memory of your moving lips and the weight of the axe that would not do its work cleanly. Tavern keepers report him muttering about the queen who wouldn't die, about eyes that tracked his movements even after separation from the neck. He claims to see your face in reflections, to hear your voice calling his name in the wind. Whether guilt or madness drives these visions, the result is the same: he dies within 5 years, found frozen in a London alley with your name on his lips. The 300 witnesses to your execution scatter across England and beyond, but they carry your story with them like a contagion. In country churches and noble drawing rooms, the tale is told and retold. How Mary Stuart died with dignity, despite the executioner's brutality. How her faith sustained her through agony that would have broken lesser souls. How even death could not immediately silence her prayers. Each telling adds new details, embellishments that transform historical fact into legend. Catholic households whisper that you spoke prophecies during those 15 minutes after beheading, that your moving lips pronounced curses on Elizabeth's line and blessings on the faithful. Protestant chroniclers document the medical impossibility of prolonged consciousness after decapitation, using your case to argue for more skilled executioners and cleaner methods of dispatch. Your ladies-in-waiting, the faithful women who shared your exile, find their own lives forever marked by what they witnessed. Jane Kennedy, who held your hand through 19 years of captivity, retires to a convent in France where she spends her remaining years writing detailed accounts of your final moments. Her testimony becomes the foundation for Catholic martyrologies that present your death as divine intervention, proof that faith can transcend the body's limitations. Elizabeth Curl, your other faithful companion, returns to Scotland, where she's questioned repeatedly by authorities seeking details about Catholic plots and foreign conspiracies. But her answers focus obsessively on those final 15 minutes, on the impossibility of what she witnessed with her own eyes. She describes your moving lips, your tracking eyes, your apparent consciousness beyond death's boundary with the precision of someone who cannot forget what she's seen. Even your little terrier, Geddon, becomes part of the growing legend. The dog's refusal to eat after your death, his choice to die of grief rather than accept life without his mistress, transforms him into a symbol of loyalty that transcends species. Catholic iconography begins depicting you with a small dog at your feet, like the saints of old whose earthly companions shared their heavenly rewards. But perhaps the most significant legacy of your gruesome death emerges in the royal courts of Europe, where monarchs begin to understand that how they execute their enemies matters as much as whether they execute them. The horror of your botched beheading becomes a diplomatic liability for England, evidence of English brutality that foreign ambassadors cite in their reports home. The Spanish court, already suspicious of English intentions, uses your execution as propaganda against Elizabeth's reign. Philip II, the Catholic king who once sought your hand in marriage, commissions artists to paint scenes of your martyrdom, images that spread across Catholic Europe like visual sermons about Protestant cruelty and the price of defending the true faith. In France, where you spent your youth as queen to the young Dauphin, your death becomes a rallying cry for Catholic nobles who oppose any accommodation with Protestant powers. The woman who once danced in the palaces of Fontainebleau and Versailles is remembered not for her political failures, but for her horrible end, transformed by suffering into a symbol more powerful than any crown she ever wore. The ripple effects reach even the Ottoman Empire, where Sultan Murad III expresses shock at the Christian prince's treatment of an anointed queen. Diplomatic correspondence reveals that your execution damaged England's reputation even among non-Christian powers, who viewed the prolonged torture of a royal woman as evidence of European barbarism. Most tellingly, your execution influences the development of what future centuries will call international law. Legal scholars begin writing treatises on the proper treatment of royal prisoners, on the limits of sovereign authority over foreign monarchs, on the standards of human dignity that should apply even to convicted traitors. The notion that even enemies of the state deserve basic human treatment emerges partly as a reaction to the excess of your death. Your moving lips become a symbol that haunts the English imagination for generations. Poets write verses about the queen whose prayers could not be silenced by the headsman's axe. Playwrights craft dramas where your ghost appears to curse Elizabeth's line and prophesy England's eventual submission to Catholic powers. Even Protestant ministers use your story as an example of misguided faith that persists beyond reason, though they struggle to explain how such faith could manifest in physiological impossibilities. The medical questions raised by Dr. Fletcher's observations spark debates in universities across Europe. How long can consciousness persist after decapitation? What explains the apparent awareness you displayed in those final minutes? The physician's careful documentation becomes a cornerstone of early forensic medicine, though his conclusions challenge everything contemporary science believes about the relationship between mind and body. Your death also transforms the practice of execution throughout England. Future headsmen practice obsessively on cadavers, determined never to repeat Robert Bull's incompetence. The authorities begin requiring demonstrated skill before any executioner is permitted to dispatch nobility, understanding that botched deaths create martyrs more dangerous than any living rebel. 4 centuries after your death, tourists walk through Westminster Abbey photographing your tomb, but they have no idea that the marble effigy above them represents a woman who refused to die quietly, whose moving lips challenged everything medieval science understood about the boundary between life and death. Your story has been sanitized by time, reduced to romantic tragedy about a beautiful queen, destroyed by political necessity. Hollywood films and popular novels present your execution as a swift, dignified end to a tragic life. But the sanitized version serves a purpose. It allows comfortable audiences to consume your suffering without confronting the reality of state-sponsored torture disguised as justice. The truth remains buried in dusty archives and medical treatises that few bother to read, Dr. Fletcher's journal, with its clinical documentation of your prolonged consciousness after beheading, sits in the British Library's rare manuscript collection. Researchers occasionally stumble across his testimony, but the implications are too disturbing for popular consumption. It's easier to remember you as a romantic martyr than as a victim of systematic brutality. Your real legacy lives not in marble tombs, but in the changes your death forced upon the machinery of state execution. No English monarch since has been executed, and many historians trace this directly to the horror of your botched beheading. The image of an anointed queen, hacked to death, like an animal haunted the royal imagination so deeply that even the most tyrannical kings learned to die in their beds rather than face the scaffold. Charles I, facing his own execution in 1649, demanded detailed assurance that his headsman would be more skilled than yours. The man who beheaded the Stuart king practiced for weeks on cadavers, having read the horrific accounts of your death, and vowed never to repeat such butchery. Your suffering, in effect, purchased him a merciful end, one clean stroke that severed his neck completely. The executioner chosen for Charles was a professional brought from France, where the art of beheading had been refined to minimize suffering. English authorities, embarrassed by their history of incompetent headsmen, imported expertise to ensure that their next royal execution would demonstrate efficiency rather than brutality. Your botched death had become a national shame that demanded correction. But your influence extends beyond the technical improvements in execution methods. Your story becomes the template for royal martyrdom, the standard against which all subsequent political deaths are measured. The woman who died for her Catholic faith becomes, paradoxically, an argument for religious tolerance, for who could witness such suffering and not question whether any political cause justified such brutality. Protestant historians struggle with your legacy, torn between condemning your treason and acknowledging the excessive cruelty of your punishment. Their accounts emphasize your political crimes while glossing over the details of your execution, as if the horror of your death somehow negates the legitimacy of the charges against you. They understand instinctively that readers who focus on your suffering will forget your alleged sins. Catholic martyrologies take the opposite approach, presenting your death as divine intervention that proved your innocence and sanctity. The 15 minutes of apparent consciousness after beheading become evidence of miraculous preservation, proof that God sustained your spirit to complete your final prayers. These accounts transform your botched execution into a resurrection narrative, death defeated by faith's persistence. In Scotland, you become the mother of the nation in death as you never were in life. Your brief, chaotic reign is forgotten in favor of your prolonged martyrdom. Even Protestant Scots claim you as a symbol of Scottish resistance to English domination, your Catholicism overlooked in favor of your royal blood and defiant end. Tourists visit Edinburgh Castle, not to learn about your political failures, but to hear stories of your tragic death. The battlefield at Fotheringhay, where your scaffold once stood, becomes a pilgrimage site for those seeking to understand the intersection of faith and politics. The castle itself was demolished decades after your death, but the site retains a haunting quality that visitors struggle to define. Many report feeling watched, as if your spirit maintains some connection to the place where your body was finally broken. Modern medical experts who study Dr. Fletcher's documentation offer various explanations for your apparent post-mortem consciousness. Some argue that rapid blood loss can create illusions of movement in recently severed heads. Others suggest that the physician, traumatized by what he witnessed, embellished his observations to create a more dramatic narrative. But none can fully explain the consistent testimony of 300 witnesses who swore they saw you maintain awareness for 15 impossible minutes. The legal precedents established by your trial continue to influence international law centuries later. The principle that sovereigns cannot be tried for treason against foreign rulers, the standards for diplomatic immunity, The protocols for treating royal prisoners all trace their origins partly to the controversies surrounding your case. Your death helped establish legal frameworks that still protect political figures from the kinds of show trials that condemned you. Your execution also influenced the development of what modern scholars call transitional justice, the question of how societies should handle the crimes of previous regimes. The horror of your death became an argument against retroactive prosecution of political enemies, evidence that some forms of justice corrupt the societies that practice them more than the criminals they target. Educational systems across the Western world teach your story as a cautionary tale about religious extremism and political absolutism. Students learn about the Scottish queen who died for her faith, but textbooks carefully avoid the graphic details of your execution. The sanitized version serves pedagogical purposes without forcing young minds to confront the reality of state-sponsored torture. Popular culture continues to resurrect your story in films, novels, and television series that emphasize romance over politics, tragedy over horror. These retellings serve a psychological function, allowing audiences to experience historical suffering without confronting its full implications. Your moving lips become a romantic detail, rather than evidence of systematic cruelty. Your faith transformed into noble sentiment, rather than stubborn resistance to torture. But the deeper truth of your story lies not in its romantic elements, but in its demonstration of power's capacity for self-destruction. Elizabeth thought your execution would eliminate a political threat. Instead, it created a martyr whose legend proved more dangerous than your living presence ever was. The cousin who ordered your death spent her final years haunted by the consequences of that decision. Your death reveals the fundamental weakness of systems that depend on violence to maintain legitimacy. The scaffold at Fotheringhay was meant to demonstrate English power, but the botched execution exposed the incompetence and cruelty that lurked beneath royal authority. 300 witnesses saw not the majesty of justice, but the banality of evil dressed in official ceremony. The moving lips that horrified your executioners speak across centuries to remind us that human dignity cannot be destroyed by human cruelty. Your refusal to die quietly, your persistence in prayer even after decapitation, represents something indestructible in the human spirit that transcends political circumstances and religious differences. Today, when we see leaders dehumanizing their opponents, reducing political rivals to existential threats that justify any response, your ghost whispers from Fotheringhay's empty fields. Remember what happens when politics becomes personal, when competitors become enemies, when the machinery of state turns human beings into problems to be solved with violence. The blood has long since been scrubbed from those scaffold planks, but the stain on history remains permanent, a reminder that how we treat our enemies defines us more clearly than how we honor our friends. Your horrible death asks uncomfortable questions about the price of political stability, the limits of state authority, and the courage required to maintain human dignity when everything else has been stripped away. Your lips stopped moving after 15 minutes, but your story never has. It echoes still in every courtroom where justice confronts mercy, in every prison where power meets powerlessness, in every moment when ordinary people must choose between safety and principle. The queen who died so badly that her spirit seemed to linger between worlds reminds us that some victories come only through defeat, some freedoms only through sacrifice, and some truths only through suffering we hope never to endure ourselves. In the end, your legacy is not the crown you lost or the throne you never secured, but the dignity you maintained when dignity seemed impossible. The woman who entered Fotheringhay as a convicted traitor left as something more dangerous to tyrants everywhere, proof that the human spirit, once awakened to its own worth, cannot be silenced by any earthly power, not even death itself.